Yeah, every marketer wants to come away with like, these are the 5 rules I have to follow. Yeah, and it's never that easy.
So, if it was, it would be our life would be very easy.
Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BuzzStream podcast. My name's Vince Nero, and today I'm thrilled to invite Helena Maniglia from Reboot Online. Hey, Helena.
I've
Thanks for
been
joining. I met Elena through Oliver Sissons, who actually wrote a case study for us on the BuzzStream blog. And Ollie basically told me I need to talk to Elena because she was the one that really put together this great case study where they looked into subject lines and broke down what worked, what didn't work. So I really wanted to pick Elena's brain today on how they did the study, the interesting findings, and maybe some tactical advice for people listening. So Elena, let's get right into it. This is a great study, and I'll let you kind of lay out the methodology. I feel like that's a good place to start.
Yes, sure. So the methodology we use is we analyze over 1,000 subject lines, targeting a variety of topics. So our aim with this was to identify ideal headline lengths and the type and styles of headlines that are most likely to grab journalists' attention. To do this, we split the headline that we analyze into 4 different groups. We wanted to kind of find a way to compare them, the open rate of all of them. So the 4 categories were interrogative, so the type of headlines that are a question basically, ends with a question mark. Research-based headlines, so headlines that start with keywords such as data, study, research, things that show the journalist that the story we're trying to give them is based on data research. We also split into listicle headlines. We call it listicle, those headlines that organize the results of the study by rankings or lists. And the fourth one, the last one, was what we call buzzword. So basically headlines that include current events, any trends or celebrity names, things that are happening at the moment and will grab journalists' attention. Basically, that's what we did. We analyzed this 4 and compared the open rates between them to see what does well and what doesn't, and what tends to increase open rates and what does.
Would you say that those 4, I mean, is that primarily what you all send at Reboot?
Yes, I would say not only those. We do different other types of headlines, but we felt that categorizing by this would be good to kind of have a better idea of open rate. So we compared headlines with question marks, with headlines without question marks, headlines that include data or buzzwords, with headlines that didn't, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. This is really interesting. So I want to dig in a little bit more. So when you talk about the content that you're sending, based off of these categorizations, are there specific industries that you kind of broke it down into?
Yes, because we actually analyzed the headlines that we used in a specific amount of time, we included a variety of topics. So from property sector, lifestyle, travel industry to motor, finance, entertainment. So it was quite a big pool.
Yeah, yeah. So let's get into some of the main takeaways. One of the things here I'm reading from my other screen here is subject lines, phrases, questions have had a 13% lower open rate compared to headlines without question. So basically, without a question mark, gets you a better open rate. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, so we found that interesting because I think it shows how headlines with questions are quite predictable and ambiguous.
Hmm.
So I think predictable in a way that you're kind of asking the journalist for a response. You're not actually giving them what they need. You're asking for an information. So I think that this can potentially lead journalists to just keep opening the email because they already know the answer. So it's quite predictable. You're not actually
So
giving them the data.
right. So would you say, or I guess, could you give us an example of like a question subject line?
Yes, a good example of a question in a headline, which we gave even in the blog post on Buzzwords, is why female is the most haunted place in Britain. So it's the headline we use for that didn't get as much open rate as we had when we actually said Plymouth is the most haunted place in Britain, or is amongst the most haunted place, because we're giving the journalist a sentence that we know the answer, whereas the other one you're kind of requesting the journalist to think of reasons why, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I recall us having a rule at Siege where it was like if the journalist could answer the question no, like that would get them to not open the email, like that's not a good type of question. So if it was like, is Plymouth the most haunted place? If they knew right off the bat, like yes or no, then they're just gonna click through it, right?
Yeah. We say a lot at Reboot that there's always the so what that we have to think about, and
Hmm.
not only in headline subject lines, but also like the hook of the story that we're doing, or even like the type of data we are searching to get our data team is actually trying to find. We're always trying to think about the so what. So what we're giving to the journalists, is it a so what kind of a story or headline that they will look saying not really interesting, not giving me anything.
So right. So if I was doing a post about, say, the 10 best beaches in the UK, what would a subject line question be?
The top 10 beaches you said in the UK.
The beaches. Yeah,
Beaches.
yeah.
Um, I think like looking at our study, you can apply them to the four category that we analyze.
Yeah.
So we could look at, for example, no question mark. We're gonna go through in the podcast, but avoiding maybe saying data or survey. So it would be probably something more tailored to the region. So for example,
Mm.
go to the region that come up on top, or the city that come up on top, and say X is the best, has the best beach in the UK. Or comparisons as well do really well. So if you compare one region to the other, so X beach is
Yeah.
the bank's X beach as the best in the UK, also tends to do well. It is really important when thinking about subject line, also understanding obviously the journalists you're reaching out to, and analyze the type of subject line and headlines they use in their article, and also the website and the outlet. So does this outlet tend to be more positive or negative about the topic of your study? How you can approach that in a way that it will be the same language as they use, that this will help get the familiarity of the journalist. The journalist can look at their inbox and actually see something they're familiar with and they know. So this is really important.
Yeah, sorry, I'm probably jumping the gun here with some of these questions, but this is all great stuff, and maybe we'll come back to some of those because I want to jump to the next point, which you actually mentioned. So one of the other findings from your study was starting subject lines with keywords like data or study or survey didn't really have any significant impact on the open rate. Why do you think that is?
So the difference I remember wasn't like a very significant one, but I feel that it's because it is overused keywords. First of all, these keywords have become very common in subject line. So if many emails that the journalists receive use these keywords, they may not, your study won't stand out enough to actually increase the open rate. And I think that if important words like data study are there at the beginning, maybe the best part of your study, the actual hook, is at the end, which means that depending on the length of your
Mm.
subject line, it's going to cut off. So the journalist will actually see data reveals or survey reveals, but won't see the rest.
Right. Yeah, that makes total sense. How about, did you test anything like exclusive? I feel like that's something that journalists have said, or at least I've heard in the past that like that sometimes gets clicked.
Yes, journalists are always searching for exclusives. Not all of them, but they are always trying to obviously find a more unique story. So yeah, they do make the difference. We've never done any study on this. So I don't have data to back up, but I think
Yeah.
speaking from personal experience, that really helps. And I think it is a good way as well to start building relationship with journalists as well. Because when you offer exclusive, you're starting there a connection that you could benefit from later on, and they will benefit as well.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned something interesting too, like about keywords in general, like overused keywords. Are there any others that you can think of outside of like survey or data? Are there ones that people should maybe avoid?
I think it really depends on the study, isn't it? But I do feel that it is more what you want. There's always spammy keywords as well, words that
Hmm.
the mail server will see as a spam and won't
Right.
actually delivery. Will go to the spam folder. So this is something to be mindful as well. So there are websites that show spammy words. So this is something quite good that can help. We constantly try to find them and avoid. So this can cause the open
Like
rates to
words like
go.
free, right? Like yeah.
Yeah, yeah, a few other words as well.
Yeah, like dollar signs in the subject lines, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes not even words, but the way you write the press release. If there are too many uppercase, for example, it can go to spam. Not all cases, obviously, but things to have in mind when writing.
Yeah. So, okay. Another one that you mentioned here was listicle subject lines. They seem to have a little bit better open rates than words that aren't. So, can you first just clarify what you mean by like a listicle subject line again?
Yeah, so we call them listicle headlines that have this style of like rankings or lists. So top 10 beaches to visit in the UK, 10 worst TV series finales, or like the five best coffee shop in London. This type of list that we're quite used to seeing online. So this is the type of headline that we call listicle. It is interesting that there wasn't a huge difference as well. The open rates were just 1% above. But I think that, again, this type of headlines can be predictable depending on who you're sending to. I think it's all subject lines are quite relative. It really depends on who you're sending to and the context of your story. But if this type of headline can fall in the place of being predictable because they make the recipient feel like they already know what to expect. But if you give the hook, for example, as I was saying, the X beach, the bank, Y beach in the UK, for example, this already gives the hook, even though it kind of shows that you have a listicle style of content, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So, rather than thinking of it like a listicle and actually laying it out super obviously, kind of try to work the hook in there. It sounds like is the takeaway. Yeah. All right. So next one was subject lines containing buzzwords like celebrity names, events, or special dates had a much higher open rate. And I think overall, like this seemed to be the strongest data point of the study in terms of differentiation amongst open rates. So why do you think the buzzword thing is really the key here?
Yeah, it's funny. This one is the one that didn't come as a surprise when we saw the result. I think it's because obviously the news cycle is always urgent, so journalists are trying to find things that resonate with their audience, but it's also timely. It's happening at the moment, so trends and the celebrities that are in the news at the moment, they're doing something relevant, or even like special dates, Valentine's Day, Easter recently, summertime, for example. So any of these words that people are talking about, that's what journalists want to write about because it's relevant to their audience. So I think that's the main reason why this type of headlines do well. I think it's being smart enough as well in the way you phrase the headline again, trying to always in your study find the hook that links to that specific buzzword to actually make it relevant.
Mm.
It's not only the buzzword that makes it relevant, it's also finding that hook, that unique hook in your study that will be relevant and is giving the journalist something new to talk about that person. Because as well as these people and this specific date, etc., are in the news, they're overly shared. Like there's so much content about them that you have to find a unique angle that will add value
Hmm.
what you're doing.
Right. So let's say, using our beaches example, are you saying it would make sense to try to find some type of event or buzzword that you can kind of tie that to? Like maybe it is X beach is great for summer 2024, or like for what, a specific holiday, or maybe where like a certain celebrity was cited at or something. Like just try to figure out ways to insert the keywords or sorry, buzzwords into that.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. I think the beach one is a good example for summertime, for example. It's a good way to tie both. We
Yeah.
did one recently at Reboot that was about Taylor Swift. Obviously, she's everywhere, and her tour was everywhere as well. People trying to buy tickets, and there was a lot of pen in the news of like
Interesting.
yeah, people being targeted. And what we decided to do is a study on like tips to avoid being scammed when buying your Taylor Swift tickets. So we used the relevant keyword there, Taylor Swift, but added a unique angle that was tied into what was happening in the news, and it did really well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Is this better to do in the ideation stage? Is to kind of tie it to a buzzword or keyword, or do you find it doesn't really matter?
Yeah, I think different people have different ways to do, but I would say that, at least personally, I find that it is a constant process. So first, obviously, when you're doing your strategy and you already have your comparative in mind, you will search for keywords that are related to your campaign and go online and see how the media reacts to the topic, how subject lines are used. Again, different industries and different websites and outlets, they will use headlines in a different way. So it's good for you to have this knowledge before even writing the press release, just when you're doing your research, and ensuring that the keywords that you're using in your study are being also used to search. It's a constant process, because then when you write the press release, you can revisit again. Is there something else that when you were writing that you clicked and you can add to your subject line? And obviously, before sending filler emails is a good way as well that we find to see if the headline works or not. So we tend to do basically exclusives as well, but not always. So if you could just reach out to the journalist when you already know kind of what you want to do in the study. For example, in our case, sometimes it is extensive data set. So we want to make sure that this is actually like we're analyzing the best metrics to actually create that story. So to reach out to journalists and ask like, have this study that we're working on? Is that something that is of interest to you while we're searching for in a study like that? Kind of having that feedback early on so you can build up. And I think that the subject line is kind of the thing you can try out with the filler email.
Yeah. So sorry to hit on that one specifically, like the feeler emails. Is it the same approach with the subject line as well? Like, are you using the same type of subject line where it's X beat is better than Y beat? Like, what would the subject line look like for a feeler
In
email?
this
Like,
case, yeah, in this case, well, you can either go with exclusive and say, look, we are doing this. If it is of interest to you, we can give you an exclusive. So you would put the exclusive
hmm
there in the subject line, or you can go to upcoming study as well. So upcoming study on UK beaches, something like that. Something that gives the journalists, and I think it goes back to what we're going to talk about, how subject lines need to be clear of what you were actually delivering there. And I think giving yeah, the specific word that they gonna look and they already know what it's about is is the key.
yeah, yeah. I feel like so much of subject line writing is really uh, experimentation and like I feel like who was I talking to? I think it was Hannah Smith in one of our previous podcasts where she said she writes out like 25 subject lines before each campaign just to really hone it in on what it is that's going to be the most like clickable and really stand out. Do you recommend that type of a detail for your subject line writing?
Yes, definitely. I think that if you actually think of exactly what you want to say, but I do think that with digital PR as well, it's about trying out. So again, yeah, trying different headlines, doing the first send, compare between industries and even like different countries, different journalists as well, and see what works, and then always try to improve and use the one that actually is standing out the most.
Yeah.
We at Reboot, we work very collaboratively, so we always try to help each other with this as well. So we always write different kind of headline options that we think that are actually relevant for that specific sector, and always ask each other what we think that works or not. And we
Oh,
kind of
nice.
yeah.
I remember doing something kind of similar to that, but I mean, is it like in Slack or do you have like a formalized process?
Yeah, it sounds like so. It depends if you just you can do it with your team or company wide. But we tend to do this because we kind of already have a feel of what is actually will grab the most attention from journalists.
Right.
But I think every person has a different way to do it as well. A/B tests work really well as well. Um, again, I think that is always trying to improve from what you kind of learned in the beginning.
Yeah. I want to touch something that you mentioned a couple times here, and it's this the idea of like how a journalist talks about a topic. I'd love for you to expand a little bit more on that. So let's say, let's use the beaches example again, just because it's easiest. Is there something to finding what kind of like the sentiment that like the journalist has? Like maybe they don't like a specific beach you're talking about. Is like that what you mean by kind of tailoring the sentiment to the journalist?
No, I think what I try to say is that journalists have different ways to use headlines and approach topics. So I think that is
Mhm.
really important when you're writing, is having this in mind when you're actually reaching out to the journalist about your study, about your story. I feel that when you research the journalist's preferences and the way they write, what they like to cover, and how they cover that, it will help your subject line to be actually more relevant than others when they're actually going through their email inbox. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I think some journalists will obviously have stronger opinions about something, or regional journalists as well will obviously they come from sometimes the region they're writing about, so they will be more protective
Mhm.
about the result of their
Right.
study. But like any other person.
Yeah. How far do you get into we're getting a little off topic, but how far do you get into like personalizing per journalist?
I think that's a huge, huge part of what we do actually, is just making sure that we personalize emails, and we try to personalize as much as we can, making sure that we know who we are reaching out to. I personally think that this is really important because I think sometimes we forget that we are building relationships with these journalists. So this starts very early on when you're actually writing your subject line and making sure that it is actually relevant to that person. And from the email as well, the introduction, always making sure that, for example, if you're reaching out to the journalist, if you know if they covered that topic, if they covered that topic recently, if that topic is actually of interest to them, if that's something that the style they write, all the little things, I think it's really important. Especially preferences. I think we need to understand that journalists are very busy people, and we need to respect their time as well, and ensure that we respect their preferences. Either is calling instead of sending emails. Obviously, now emails are the biggest preference,
Right.
but it could be even the time you reach out to them, the times that
Mhm.
they work. Not all of them will work 5 days a week. They will have specific times. So I think this is small things. Everything that we can make to make their lives easier is what we want, and ensuring that
Yeah.
they know that on the other side here, we know who they are.
So when you're talking about personalization, just to be clear, sounds like you're not necessarily talking about personalization in the way that some like link builders might do it, where it's like, hey, I saw you wrote XYZ article. I really love, you know, ABC within the article. It sounds like you are more so talking about just like really understanding the journalist beat and, where the way that they cover stories, maybe rather than like personalizing to that specific journalist by calling out like an article or something. Is that right?
No, I think you can do both. I feel that we talk a lot. You see a lot being talked about writing personalized email to the journalist, as I would say, and including this. But I feel that the personalization comes from this strategy, and that's what I was trying to say, kind of having in mind who you reach out to and understanding how they write and the beat and things. I think it's a combination of everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. It's funny that with the personalization thing, I feel like there's definitely like a line in the sand. Some people don't like to do it at all. Some people say, let's get right into it. The journalist doesn't really care. They just want to know what to write about. Whereas other people like to try to make that connection. Do you feel like there's ever a time when you should go one way or the other?
I feel that I actually had came across these two types. I came across journalists. Even when you read the studies about it as well, you see that some journalists say that they don't like, they prefer just a straightforward email. I think you can do both. It depends on the journalist, and that's why it's so important to understand the person who's behind as well. And I think as long as it's genuine, not actually something you're doing
Right.
to just kind of I don't know, just to get the journalist, and it's not something that you're actually interested. I think maybe that's where as journalists don't like.
Yeah, and no, I think that's totally true. If it feels forced, I mean, I even know from my personal experience, if I get emails like guest post requests or something, like if it's fake, then I immediately block it out. Again, like I hate to get too far off this, but I feel like this is all rolled into the subject line thing too. It's like this personalization, getting to know the author. Are there ways to kind of speed up the process to understand and like get to know the journalist? Because that's another part that you get some pushback on where it's like it takes a long time to really personalize every email. Are there tips that you have for speeding that up and
I
finding
think
out the
upstream is a
information
good
you
one.
need to? Yeah. All right.
There are various ways to personalize emails on BuzzStream, which we find are very useful. I feel as well that it's all about, again, our job is to make their lives easier and build these relationships. Like it's so important because it works both ways. I personally find that it will take more time to me if I actually have a good relationship with journalists that I will have in mind when I'm writing a press release and then I send to them. Or ask them, like, writing about this, is this something that is interesting? Thought that this could be of interest to you? Is this something that you would like to receive? And guarantee a link without actually much effort. Knowing that I know what they like and I know what is going to be relevant to them. I personally, when I used to do a lot of digital PR campaigns, that's the strategy that I personally use. And it did work well for me. But I do feel that Bloodstream is a good way to personalize emails. But I always do feel that bulk send is something that we should avoid as much as we can, because you can build good results and get links without doing this. So I personally
Yeah.
prefer the personalized email. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm on the same page. I feel like there's probably a line where like maybe it's like the bigger the journalist is, if it's the Wall Street Journal or like New York Times in the States here, like maybe they don't care as much. But if it's like a local publication, it's probably easier or nicer to personalize, or more effective, I should say. All right. So the last thing I wanted to hit before we go here is this idea of the last takeaway of subject line word length. So in your study, you found subject lines 4 to 8 words tend to have higher open rate than ones that exceed 8 words. And when I first read that, I was like, wow, like a subject line that's 4 words long, what would that even be? But it feels short to me. But why is this? Why is the word length so important? And then what kind of tips do you have for cutting out some words? Because I feel like, again, 4 to 8 words is tough.
For words, it's tough. I think it's just, I think maybe for content, everybody will love to try things, and we did try to see if it worked. And
Yeah.
yes, I think that's where this for headline for words headline come from. We tend to use between 8 and 11. I think that's kind of the best practices, at least like I personally like.
Hmm.
I feel that shorter headline helps us to be concise, helps us to be clear, and also helps looking from the strategy part of it. It helps. It's more user friendly for mobile as well, and it helps to not cut off when you're in an email inbox. So it's just a little bit of a strategy, and it shows that it works. They have more open rates than the longer ones. So I think it's just avoiding obviously extreme, going over, I would say like 12, 13 words, or going too low
Hmm.
like 4 words.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Read my email, something like that. All right. So we pretty much covered everything, the main takeaways, and I don't want to boil this down into like this is what you have to do every subject line, because it sounds like that's not necessarily the case. It sounds like more so these are best practices, um, but everybody's different. Is kind of seems to be the message from you, where you still want to tailor this to the specific person you're reaching out to. But kind of to recap here, it's like you want to try to kind of match the language um, with your subject line, that in the way that the target journalist writes. It seems like questions are maybe not as helpful, especially when they're really obvious. Um, Avoiding things like study and data, those like any common keywords or buzzwords, um, try to avoid those, and trying to, I guess, tie in buzzwords is probably the more effective route. Does that sound like I kind of covered the main takeaways?
Yeah, I think it does. Something I would say is, again, yeah, I think everyone has different ways to do, and I feel that a lot of the comparisons we made, the open rates are not, apart from the buzzword one, as you said, they're
Oh,
not very
mm,
significant. I think again, it goes down to what we were saying. It depends on who you were reaching out to. So I think knowing knowing the person that you're sending your email to, and researching about the journalist, it's actually better and more strategic to just going to the specific, just say like rule based on,
right, right, right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, every marketer wants to come away with like, these are the 5 rules I have to follow. Yeah, and it's never that easy.
No, if it was, it would be, our life would be very easy.
Right. It's right.
Yeah, I would say that also it depends a lot on the industry and type of outlet you're sending out to. Obviously, if you do a huge data research, you want to program. If it is a survey data, you want to tell straight away that that's it, and it will work, might work.
Yeah. All right, I had 2 quick questions I'm gonna ask before we hopped off here. So when I was with Siege Media, one of the things we found out with subject lines was when you added the like website name that you were reaching out to in the subject line, it helped increase open rates. So say I was reaching out to um like Daily Mail, it would say something like article for Daily Mail, 10 best beaches in the UK or something like that. Did you have you ever come across anything like this?
I've never tried myself, no. I just feel that looking at the findings and the analysis we did, it could come down to familiarity. Maybe that's why it does so well, because the journalist will look and it is a familiar name, obviously,
Right.
for the outlet. So it brings that, and yeah, it makes maybe the email show more like an appear to be more trustworthy, or even like more relevant to
Right.
them.
Yeah. Yeah, I will say that I think in our case it was more so like blogger outreach versus journalist outreach, but still something interesting to think about nonetheless. All right, the last thing is this is like one of those kind of I'm gonna call it like black hat tactic, maybe just like a spammy tactic, but I've seen people recommend using like RE or FWD, like forward, in an initial email to make it appear like you've had a conversation already when you really haven't. This is the first email. Have you ever tried this? Is that effective? How do you feel about that?
Yeah. So I think about this. We tend to take the long term route. I think personally, why when you add the ER or FWD, uh, this may result in short term results that will increase maybe open rates and even lead to a coverage, but it's not sustainable on my point of view because they kind of compromise the relationship we have with journalists because make them not see you as a trustworthy source, while that I tend to follow the harder and longer route, which will be approach journalists and prioritize transparency with them. And I think this lays the groundwork for lasting collaborations with them and ultimately also contributing to the positive reputation of our client. They see us as a trustworthy source. They see our clients as a trustworthy source as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah, I mean, we are, especially at an agency, you are kind of another arm of your client. So, however you can put them in a good light, I really like that thought process, and kind of relationship building. So, Elena, I don't want to take up any more of your time here. This has been super helpful, and it's been great talking with you about subject lines. And I will link to this study specifically. I'll also link out to I want people to be able to follow you on LinkedIn and Twitter. So I'll add those in your show notes or the show notes for this. But Elena, thanks so much for joining us. Is there anything else you want to leave the BuzzStream listeners with?
No, I think it's just a huge thank you. And it's always great to collaborate with you. We really enjoy using BuzzStream. It's been a very valuable database and prospecting tool for us as well. So thank you.
Yeah, so kind of you to say. Well, again, thanks so much, Helena Maniglia from Reboot Online. And you can find her online, you can find Reboot, and I'll link to all those in the show notes. Thanks again for watching.